they were just selling marijuana. That was their defense. Not that they weren't selling drugs, but that they were just selling weed. I don't know from a distance if that's true or not, but I don't know that it makes it okay that we have just agreed not to, how you doing? That we've agreed, thank you, that we have agreed not to prosecute these crimes, that we've decided to allow this drug market to flourish. Before I talk about the 5-part solution, I want to make clear why it's such a big deal. Overdose death rates in Baltimore have skyrocketed. People are losing their lives because drug dealers are lacing marijuana with fentanyl, lacing heroin with fentanyl, competing with rival drug organizations to have the most potent drugs. The drug markets are the subject of violent competition between rival gangs. Whether it's Green Mountain East or Edmondson Village or Cherry Hill, these profitable drug territories are the epicenter of violence because these groups know this is where people come to buy drugs, and they can sell drugs at high margins with no consequences. With impunity they operate because we have let them. We've sent the message that they can stand here in the middle of the day and sell drugs all day long, and a cop's not going to stop them, a prosecutor's not going to prosecute them. The only people that speak up are the people that live in the shadows of it, that are trying to raise kids in the shadow of it, that are trying to go to church and send their kids to school in the shadow of this long-lasting problem. Well, we're going to do something about it, because as I have said from the very beginning of this campaign, this state's attorney's race is not just about documenting and dissecting the problem, to explain the root causes and how long it's been here. It is also to explain that we have to do something about it. So today we're unveiling a 5-part solution to shut down these open-air drug markets. Whether they're in Northeast or Northwest or Southwest or Southeast Baltimore, this has to end, and it has to end now. The first thing we're going to do is to pursue long-term, protracted undercover investigations using wiretaps, by-walk operatives, as well as cell phone analyses to make sure we know how these organizations operate. I want to be clear, this isn't something I invented for the purposes of a campaign. It's what I was doing when I was a city and federal prosecutor. As chief of major investigations, as a federal violent crimes prosecutor, we did these kinds of investigations to not only take off one drug dealer here or there, but to remove and dismantle these drug organizations root and branch. Because that's the way we create a window opportunity for these communities. For those of you at home, I want to make sure it's clear how these investigations actually work. Traditionally, we would send in a undercover. They'd be equipped with an audio-video camera, and they'd buy drugs, and as soon as they bought the drugs from the drug dealer, they would arrest the person. That's called a buy-bust. You buy the drugs, you bust the dealer, you've taken one dealer off the streets. You've got an audio-video recording of it, so it's a pretty good case, but it doesn't really address or tackle the broader problem. So a few years ago, when I was chief of major investigations, we pioneered a new approach, at least for Baltimore, at least at the local level, where we would send our undercover operatives into these known drug organizations, into these known drug markets, and buy drugs on Monday, and then buy again on Wednesday, and buy again on Friday. And then the following week, we would do certain things to get the phone numbers of the dealers. And then we would do analyses of those cell phones to find out who they were calling right before and after a drug deal, who they were calling right before they went and got a stash. We were linking up to all of the cameras in the area, so we saw the operation of these organizations over the span of hours. We identified each individual and we looked at their criminal histories. If necessary, we went up on wiretaps on their phones. And over the course of a 4 to 6 to 8 week investigation, we would bring an indictment that arrested all of the drug dealers. Not just the corner boys here or there, but the lieutenants and the generals, the suppliers. We brought them all to justice. And we had a case that was strong enough to hold up in court. Why? Because they were charged with a conspiracy. Those are the kinds of ideas that a seasoned prosecutor can bring to bear. So number one, protracted long-term investigations using undercover operatives that use wiretaps and cell phone analyses to dismantle the organization from top to bottom. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on very specific neighborhoods where we've seen fatalities spike because of overdose death rates. We know that overdose deaths are skyrocketing in Baltimore 1 year after the next. So what are we going to do? We're going to make sure that the neighborhoods that we know have these overdose death rate spikes are the places that we focus our resources. When I was a federal prosecutor, we pursued prosecutions to make an example of certain dealers. A few years ago, there was a prosecution here in Baltimore of a dealer who advertised to his buyers that his stuff was the stuff that killed people. A death would happen from an overdose, and he would literally send a text message to his buyer saying, "This is the stuff that killed Shorty." And that would attract victims of addiction to buy from him. Shame on him for using the death of another as a marketing strategy, but we're going to use it as a way to target those dealers, to target those drug organizations that feel comfortable lacing their heroin and their cocaine and their marijuana with fentanyl to drive up the potency, but to drive down the costs. Those neighborhoods are going to be the specific focus of our attention. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to work with small businesses all across the city that are the areas where drug markets thrive without impunity in broad daylight. This gas station behind us, Miss Monique and I have talked about. There are gas stations all across the city where the drug dealers use the foot traffic and the vehicle traffic as cover, as an excuse for being in the area, for loitering in the area. These gas stations sometimes have high definition camera footage of the deals, and yet the prosecutors aren't prosecuting the cases. The police aren't bringing the cases, saying the prosecutors aren't going to bring charges against simple drug transactions. That's a problem. Well, we're going to not only prosecute those cases, that's the start. We're going to go beyond that. We're going to offer financial subsidies to commercial establishments, whether they're liquor stores or gas stations or convenience stores where we see open-air drug markets operating. We're going to offer them financial subsidies to get high-quality security cameras and link them in to the City Watch program so that you can watch from Watch Center the drug dealing happening in live time. We can document it, we can record it, we can download it and give it to the prosecutors so that to compound the protracted drug transaction cases, we also have specific opportunities to go after specific drug dealers that are operating with impunity near these convenience stores. The fourth thing we're going to do is we're going to use the Maryland laws that are already on the books to go after drug organizations that sell near schools and sell using juveniles. Too many drug organizations have gotten the impression that they can use kids to avoid the consequences of the criminal justice system because we're just giving the kids a slap on the wrist. Shame on the adults that are exploiting those children and laying a path of doom for them even before they're 14 or 15 or 16 years old. We don't have to go after the juveniles in those cases. We can go after the adult drug dealers, the traffickers, the lieutenants and the generals that are using the kids, using Maryland laws that specifically make it illegal to use juveniles to sell drugs, that make it illegal to sell drugs within a certain distance of a public school, of a private school. The high school is across the street, and yet they're using kids to sell drugs, sometimes to other kids. Well, there's drug laws on the books already that make this illegal. We're going to make sure we use those laws in effect. When I was Deputy Attorney General, we started bringing those kinds of cases as part of the organized crime unit. Go ahead and take that phone away. Mine. Sorry about that. My phone is ringing. I just want to make sure that it wasn't disturbing the people at home. That's the fourth thing we're going to do. And the fifth thing we're going to do, because we do have to address this problem holistically, is make sure that there's real diversion programs for victims of addiction. In 2015 and then again in 2017, we talked about and then launched a pilot program for LEAD. the law enforcement assisted diversion program, was modeled on a successful approach in Seattle where cops, in coordination with prosecutors, would take victims of addiction and not take them to central booking, but instead take them to the drug treatment centers where they could get the support and services that they need. In 2017, that's what, 5 years ago? 5 years ago, we launched a pilot program that had a capacity of 60 people. This morning, I went on and searched to see if there had been a single update in the 5 years since. There hasn't. We have these good ideas. We do the press conference. We do the ribbon cutting. We're there for the cameras, and then we disappear afterwards. There has not been a single update since 2017 within the police department, from the state's attorney's office, who, by the way, supported this program since 2017. If you want to get victims of addiction the treatment services they need, you can't just do the ribbon cutting, you got to do the work. I wanted to explain that in some detail so that people know that this is rooted not just in common sense, but also my experience as a federal prosecutor, seeing example prosecutions made of drug dealers who peddle their poison and then use the deaths of others as a marketing strategy. Based on my experience as Deputy Attorney General, where we pursued prosecutions of organizations that used juveniles and sold drugs within a certain distance of public and private schools here in Baltimore. That was rooted in my experience as a city prosecutor, as Chief of Major Investigations, where we went after drug organizations using long-term protracted investigations with undercover buys and wiretaps. This is what we need to do if we're going to solve this problem, not just today, but for posterity. Ms. Washington and I were here for a press conference last year. We talked about the open-air drug dealing that was happening not once a week, not once a month, not after the stores closed, not just on weekends, literally every day from morning until night. Am I wrong? Am I exaggerating? No. From morning until night on a major thoroughfare near a grocery store and a high school with a Shell station in the middle of it and convenience stores around the corner, drug dealers have been selling cocaine, heroin, marijuana, all laced with fentanyl for years. And if you look at the cluster of violence in this neighborhood, you will see that this isn't just about drug dealing. It's about eradicating the shootings and the carjackings and the homicides that are an inevitable, inexorable consequence of these open-air drug markets. Let's shut them down. Let's shut them down with common sense approaches. Number one, long-term protracted investigations using wiretaps and undercover buys. Number two, partnering with our small businesses to give them financial subsidies to make sure they have cameras that are linked with the City Watch network at the Baltimore Police Department. Number three, targeting organizations where there are spikes in overdose deaths. Number four, going after those organizations that are using juveniles and selling near schools with existing Maryland laws that are already on the books. And number five, dramatically expanding diversion programs like LEAD, the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, which was a pilot in 2017 and hasn't grown one bit ever since. That's a problem, but those are the kinds of solutions that we need to make sure that we solve this problem once and for all. I'll take a few questions, if there are any from the reporters or the audience. Dad, you got any questions? All right, my dad said I did well, so I think we're good. Any questions? Ms. Monique? All right, thank you folks for tuning in from home. Thank you for paying attention to this issue. And again, every week for the next 8 weeks, just as we started with armed carjackings and open air drug markets today, we'll be talking about human trafficking, gangs and guns, robberies and burglaries, public corruption, some of the specific issues that get lost in the shuffle because we're so busy talking about the homicide number that has driven apart our city. Thank you so much. Thank you, folks at home.